Hello and welcome back to another document deep dive. When you're watching this, I'm not actually at my computer, but enjoying Christmas at home with my family. So I decided to record this in advance. This will be the earliest document deep dive yet. Namely, it's about the battle for Dunkirk, a very famous battle early in the war, around May and June 1940. And we're starting, as always, with a short look at the division involved. This is the 61st Infantry Division, which was one of the second wave of German divisions that was launched into World War II. One thing that catches my eyes here, even though it's pretty standard, you got your 10 centimeter guns, your 10.5 centimeter, your heavy guns. The infantry already here only has 9 light machine guns in each company, which would indicate to me that they only had 3 squads in each platoon instead of 4, which was normal here. On the other hand, they also only have 2 light mortars supporting each company instead of 3, so maybe they only had 2 platoons, but with 4 squads. Would that work, kind of, with 8? So yeah, this is kind of weird. It seems like these were under strength. Now, they were involved already in fighting in, I think, Poland and also Belgium, including the fort at Email. One thing interesting here is that they were apparently equipped with MG08 or MG08/15. I don't know if this is in regards to all of them, or if there was something that was color-coded here, so that some of them had MG34s and some had MG08/15s, but it is quite possible that these were equipped with these World War I guns. And this is actually kind of the impetus of this video. When picturing this first stage of the war, many people picture kind of the masses of Panzers advancing with Stuka support and so on, when really much of it was infantry fighting, and many of these infantry divisions had not yet been brought up to the standard with the MP40, K98K, MG34 mix kind of thing. This would be achieved for the 1941 campaign mostly, but these were very often not well equipped in that sense. So that's quite interesting. Now, as I said, this is about the battle for Dunkirk, and I will do it a bit different this time, because what I will quote here are 2 translated Erlebnisberichte, which is a special type of after-action report that is mostly written by the lower rungs of the army. These are sometimes, not these ones here in particular, but sometimes these are actually written in kind of a weird, kind of pulpy adventure novel style, which is kind of odd. I think they were mostly produced for possible propaganda reasons. It's kind of odd. Some of them are really kind of trashily written. It's kind of weird. These ones are more, the ones I'm going to read for this battle are actually more like a normal AAR. But okay, so what exactly will we be looking at? This is about a German attack on the 2nd to the 3rd of June in 1940 on the Dunkirk perimeter, namely at the village of Spycker. And yeah, these are 2 AARs that I will simply read out here, and while I do that, we will look at maps and Google Earth. Alright, this is the first AAR, and this is a sketch that was attached to that file. What you see here is the village of Spycker. The German jump-off point was around the village of Dunkirk, and they advanced in this direction here. We will look at a different map later where this is maybe a bit clearer, but what I'm about to read happens in this part of the map, roughly. Okay, 2nd June 1940. How the 2nd Company of 162nd Infantry Regiment stormed the key position of the enemy's defensive line in front of Dunkirk, the village of Spycker. After a strenuous march through pitch darkness towards Dunkirk, the battalion reached the area about 1,000 meters south of Dunkirk. The area was a confusing lowland with many canals and ditches and few farms. Our company came into the sector of a company of an active rifle regiment that had only weak security north and northeast of Dunkirk. So, this area here. After coffee was served, foxholes were dug and the company went to rest, but soon the order came from the battalion to relieve this company in its security rooms. This means in its security sectors, I should say. I translated this automatically. Food was handed out in a hurry and we went straight into the sectors that had now been explored. At the handover, we were simply told that weak enemy positions had been identified in the direction of Chateau Lavgand, 1,500 meters south of Spycker, and in buildings on the canal southwest of Spycker. This is probably where I should tell you that I never had French in school, but just Latin, so this is all mispronounced. So the Chateau Lavgand is here. Spycker obviously here. The canal runs along here, and this is probably a good point to look at Google Earth. So this is the area today. We have Spycker here, Dunkirk here, where they kind of kicked off from this area. And this is the chateau, which is still there, which has a big garden, which will feature later. Now, as for the terrain here, as you can see, there it's flat and there's lots of ditches, basically. We're going to start over here just to look at this area that they had to advance through. And yeah, it is flat and there are canals and ditches like this, which pose a serious obstacle to any advance. You can see there's a ditch running right across. So this is what you have to picture. Over there, that's Spycker, and I think this group of buildings or area might be the Chateau Lavgand. While the forward security forces were being relieved, enemy artillery of medium and light calibers swarmed the area around Dunkirk. Scouting troops that immediately advanced towards Chateau Lavgand and to the north encountered forward enemy security forces after just a few hundred meters and were subjected to rifle and machine gun fire. The relief had barely been carried out when the battalion commander, Major Weber, personally arrived at the front, delivered the attack order for 3 p.m. and assigned the company a combat strip and attack target. Company attack strip on the right, leading against the Dunkirk-Spycker Canal. Expansion 300 meters. So this is the combat strip here. So this is where the canal is, and 300 meters was the sector, the width of the sector for one company. Target of attack, church tower in the village of Spycker. Connection on the right, 1st Company Infantry Regiment 162. Connection on the left on the canal Infantry Regiment 151. And this is what you can see here. So this was one border. This down here was the other, and this was the combat strip where 2 companies basically advanced. And this is the 2nd company that ended up here at first. So yeah, that should give you a certain amount of overview here. Order to the company. Company prepares to attack. Left with connection to the canal. Lieutenant Mutmann's platoon, right Sergeant Hans's platoon, extension 150 meters per platoon, target of attack. There, this bump in the ground about 1,000 meters in front of us. Sergeant Chemionek's platoon follows at a distance of 300 meters behind Sergeant Hans's platoon. The company was in charge of, or had attached, 1 heavy machine gun platoon, 1 heavy mortar group, and also 1 telephone squad from the battalion. In oppressive heat, the attack broke out on a broad front, at exactly 3 p.m. The company took up the forward security and reached the ground ridge north of Dunkirk as indicated in the order without any major enemy action. When this was crossed, heavier infantry and machine gun fire began from the direction of Chateau Lavgand and the sector of Infantry Regiment 151, which caused us our first losses. The enemy also scattered the area with infantry guns and artillery fire. While the company continued to advance in individual jumps, it increasingly concentrated well-aimed infantry and machine gun fire from both flanks on itself. The connecting companies had already fallen behind, and there was no longer any contact with them. The attack came to a halt under the impression of this increasing flank fire. The company commander, Captain Krutzky, then contacted the battalion by telephone and asked for support in the form of heavy weapons. The heavy grenade launchers, so that's the heavy mortars, that had been assigned to us since the beginning of the attack and that we needed to combat the identified enemy machine gun nests did not reach the company. On the battalion's orders, the company continued the attack, but was then completely suppressed by increasing infantry and machine gun fire from the direction of Spycker and from both flanks. The company commander then took the lead of the company himself and pushed the platoons forward another 250 meters, but then came under heavy machine gun fire on the next jump and remained lying there without any contact with the company. The platoons were also covered in such a way that further advance work was initially impossible. What followed were hours of the most difficult endurance under enemy fire. I think what happened here can be quite well understood. They attacked here, so this is where the second company went, along this axis, and when they reached about, roughly this point, maybe a bit further forward, they were ahead of the rest of their troops. Their heavy mortars for some reason could not support, and they were pinned down by machine gun fire, both from the front, so from Spycker, and from the Chateau Gun, which was apparently a strong point, as well as other hamlets around here. And as you can imagine, with this kind of open terrain, it's fairly easy to get pinned down. What I can imagine, because if you look at this sketch here, this seems to be where they fought at this point, with a chateau here on their flank, and this would be the positions of the second company. What I can imagine here is that they were pinned down possibly here, maybe a bit further forward, but maybe here along this canal, which would give some cover, is what I could kind of imagine just from looking at the terrain here. So yeah, did not look good at this point. You can also see in this sketch here that there was fire coming from this group of hamlets here, as well as from the chateau, although those are a bit washed out here. Those arrows indicating the French fire. The report continues. The company was already positioned with the front platoons about 200 meters in front of the first buildings in the village of Spycker and was receiving heavy infantry and machine gun fire from half right and rear, not only from Spycker but also from the neighboring section to the left of the canal and from the Chateau Gun. As a result, the losses became more and more noticeable. The two platoons deployed at the front already had 35% losses. The enemy machine guns hammered mercilessly at every steel helmet that showed itself, making any movement impossible and no reports getting through. The line to the battalion had been shot to pieces. The troops themselves had not followed. He means the telephone troops here. The situation at the time was as follows. The attack had come to a standstill across a broad front. The company itself was under heavy infantry and machine gun fire, with the front parts about 500 meters wide, close to Spycker. The connecting company on the left was about 1,500 meters back, the right about 700 meters. The enemy artillery only scattered the area sporadically, but had a stronger effect on Dunkirk and the rear connections and artillery positions. Finally, after hours of holding out in this less than hopeful situation, first the company dispatcher, Private Maletsky, and soon afterwards the telephone squad that had remained behind, led by Sergeant Lepkowski, crawled up to the company commander one by one, despite the machine gun bursts lashing over them. Since it was not possible to establish contact with the battalion via the cable, the dispatcher Maletsky was sent to the battalion to request heavy weapons support for the identified machine gun nests. This task, which was extremely important for the further development of the attack, was carried out in an exemplary manner by the rifleman Maletsky, and within a short time perfectly aimed artillery and anti-tank fire began. The firefight between our artillery and that of the tank destroyers, who attacked the targets with extraordinary accuracy, also had its downsides for us, who were lying in the dirt, because now we had the feeling that we were not only receiving fire from the front and the flanks, but also from behind. The small fiery projectiles of the anti-tank guns, which flew rapidly over our heads, initially caused us considerable shock. However, after we had seen the excellent effect of this weapon with our own eyes, and the effect soon became pleasantly noticeable, we accepted this extra strain on our hearing and nerves. But not only the effect of the superbly shooting tank destroyers, but also the superbly shooting artillery, which reduced one house and one enemy observation post after another to rubble, and not least the half platoons of the machine gun company, which were brought into position under the most difficult conditions and supported this firefight to the best of their ability, gradually brought us a noticeable relief. Yes, that was one fucking sentence that's German for you. Meanwhile, under the most difficult conditions, the telephone squad managed to repair the cable that had been shot to pieces in several places and establish contact with the battalion. This gave the company commander the opportunity to continuously inform the battalion of the machine gun nests that had been identified, which could then be successfully attacked. The enemy must be given credit for fighting with incredible tenacity and bitterness, despite the heavy, concentrated artillery, anti-tank infantry and machine gun fire. Their machine gun bursts repeatedly pounded us from newly occupied positions, so that the approach of the reserve platoon and the reorganization of the platoons resulted in new losses. Special recognition is due here to the determined and brave efforts of the company's squad leader, Corporal Lepkowski, who, after several reporters had already unsuccessfully sought contact with platoons, okay, doesn't mean reporters here, dispatchers, established this. The next few hours passed like this. Nerves were at their peak. The feeling of being alone in the wide open spaces was expressed in unmistakable insults. It was around 9 p.m. The telephone conversations with the battalion did not provide any new information from the neighboring sectors, in particular the enemy resistance about 500 meters to the right behind us in Chateau Lafgand. We will actually talk about that one later in the other report. And in the chateau's garden seemed to be getting considerably stiffer. In this less than pleasant situation, the battalion commander asked the company commander at 9:15 p.m. to try to storm Spycker one more time. After Sergeant Shemyonek's reserve platoon had worked its way forward, the company commander gave the platoon commanders the order to make a surprise assault and break in. Shortly after 9:30 p.m., the platoon set off quite unexpectedly for the enemy, with bayonets mounted and cheering, and stormed towards the edge of the village. The left wing of the company, Lieutenant Mutmann's platoon, which had advanced the furthest, was the first to reach the village, followed shortly after by the two other platoons. Now they went inexorably through the village, which was over 100 meters long, to the northern exit. And this is what you can see here. This was the end result. The village was taken. This sudden dashing attack shortly before nightfall came as a surprise to the enemy, who was also exhausted. After a short resistance, during which houses and well-camouflaged fortified positions still had to be stormed one by one, over 500 Frenchmen laid down their arms. The company had pushed into the enemy for around 2.5 kilometers without any support over a width of around 500 to 600 meters. Now threatened from the flank and rear, the enemy still holding out to the left and right of us also flooded back, or parts of them defected to the neighboring units, which were now gradually pushing forward. The northern edge of the village of Spycker was secured against a possible counterattack from the north over a distance of around 1,600 meters with the support of Lieutenant Beltermann's platoon from the 3rd Company and the advancing right-wing company of 1st Lieutenant Wehrmeyer. The news of the break-in into Spycker was initially received with skepticism by the superior authorities. They did not want to believe that the company had actually succeeded in taking Spycker. After repeated telephone consultations with the battalion about the status of the attack, the company commander was able to report the progress of the attack until the entire village of Spycker had been taken. That same evening, the company commander, Captain Krutzky, received recognition from the battalion commander, Major Weber, for the company's achievements on behalf of the regiment, the division and the corps. It was stated that the company had succeeded in storming the key position of the enemy's defensive line in front of Dunkirk. We also learned that an order had already been received from the corps stating that, in view of the fact that the attack had stalled on a broad front, a new attack using Stuka was planned for the following morning. The advanced parts of the battalion were to retreat to the level of the battalion command post at nightfall and dig in there. Thus, and now comes the propaganda part, thus iron energy, disciplined perseverance in the face of strongest enemy fire, unbroken will to win and aggressive spirit from the officer to the common man achieved a success of unimagined proportions over an outstanding and tenacious opponent. It should also be noted that an anti-tank gun from the 151st Infantry Regiment provided exemplary support for the attack by the left-wing platoon, Lieutenant Mutmann, to the right of the canal in the sector of the 162nd Infantry Regiment until the village of Spycker was broken into and taken possession. This day will remain a page of glory for the 2nd Company 162nd Infantry Regiment. So as you can hear, the Germans were pretty proud of themselves. That said, to me it kind of looks like this was, at least to a degree, a botched job, because they did get pinned down for hours. They did not manage to bring up their supporting weapons effectively, and an unsupported infantry attack. They did receive 35% casualties, which is harsh, to say the least. But okay, as I said, there's a second report as well, and also a more detailed map. So here you can also see where this attack went, although this stops at 16:30 as far as I know, so at 4:30 p.m. And you can see here the sectors that they went through. Now this is the 1st Battalion here, which we just heard about. 2nd Company went along here. Now, What we will look at now is this sector here where there's the 3rd Battalion, which actually took the often mentioned Chateau Lavgand here, which we now will also take a closer look at through Google Earth. Back to Google Earth. So the chateau is still down here. And as you can see, there are big buildings here, even though they apparently were not that occupied. And then there's a big garden area which gets mentioned. We will see. We can't go in there directly, but I think this is some kind of auxiliary or maybe gatehouse. But you can see there's a big hedgerow all around this garden area that is almost bocage-like to a degree. This is the actual entrance here. And this hedgerow was where the actual French defensive positions were, not so much inside that building, but in this hedgerow country here. There's another entrance here. And as you can see, apparently they deal in horses or horse riding or something like that. And yeah, so this was the French position. Let's hear about how they got into there. Combat report of the 9th Company Infantry Regiment 162 on the operation on 2nd and 3rd June 1940. After a strenuous night march, the 9th Company had reached the area about 3 kilometers northeast of L'Auberge, and the men had sunk down for a short rest in a farm on the Canal Le Lacolme. Around midday, the company commander had gone to the Steenbrücke-Bruckerk road to reconnoiter the attack area. It was flat, undulating terrain, the obstacles of which were difficult to overcome. When the company commander returned, the company, led by Sergeant Isard, was already in full deployment to its staging area at the road. At 2:15 p.m., the company began its attack, 2nd Platoon on the right, 1st Platoon on the left, right wing along the Canal de la Colme, neighbor on the left, the 11th Company. The division's reconnaissance detachment is said to be stationed east of the canal. Obviously, canal, you can see that one here. So they expected them to be somewhere here. At first, nothing was seen of it. The attack progressed quickly to the farmstead of La Funelle. There, the company was met with heavy machine gun fire from the garden of the Chateau Lavgand, and flanking machine gun fire from the east side of the canal was particularly unpleasant. But machine guns were also flanking from the left, where the 11th Company was somewhat behind. So the first thing to do was to determine the location of the pockets of resistance. That was almost impossible. Nothing could be seen to the right of the canal. A car and a motorcycle messenger from the reconnaissance detachment were spotted about 2 kilometers ahead in the afternoon. They were not yet able to relieve us at that point. The enemy in front of the front, we had translation here, and on the left flank were hidden in hedges and ditches, and every farmstead was a pocket of resistance. Hardly anything could be seen. The company commander had the forward artillery observer, who had reported to him, attack some farms from which fire was coming. He sent the infantry gun platoon and the heavy grenade launchers of the 12th Company to attack closer targets. The light grenade launchers attacked the nearest targets. A half platoon of the 12th Company under Lieutenant Kipper was installed on the roof of the farm and fired on hedges and ditches. The observation posts for all weapons were placed on all roofs of the farm, and at times there were so many people on the roofs that it was a miracle that they did not collapse. Machine gun fire hit the walls, but the observers and leaders were not disturbed. But the enemy could not be identified with any certainty. The battalion then ordered a violent attack in the late afternoon. The left platoon under Corporal Kirstein and the 3rd platoon under Sergeant Isard, which had previously been behind the dangerously open right wing and had been moved over to the left, rushed forward as ordered. They did not get any further. Heavy machine gun fire swept towards them. Corporal Kirstein and 2 men were killed. When they were able to be buried the next day, we found that they had been literally sawed to pieces from top to bottom by machine gun bursts. About an hour before dark, we managed to fight down a machine gun nest on the left wing and break through this hole. That's at the chateau. The garden of the Chateau Lavgand was taken. Now it became clear that it would never have been possible to take it head-on, even with mass deployment in the Russian style and even with the use of hand grenades. The French were lying behind a hedge in deeply dug holes that had been built up with bales of pressed straw. This pressed straw is excellent at keeping out grenade splinters. The hedge was so thick that it was impossible to cross. In front of it was a water-filled ditch. Grenades and hand grenades would only have been effective if it had been possible to get them over the hedge into the invisible holes. The position itself was peppered with countless machine guns. The fact that one machine gun fired and another fired after it made it very difficult to determine its position. Breaking in from the flank, it was then possible to roll up the entire front without difficulty. The company advanced to the path that leads from Spycker Church to the southeast. So if we look here, we have Spycker here. I'm guessing they mean this path maybe, or possibly this one. If we go to Google Earth, maybe we can get a bit of a clearer picture here. So we have the chateau, and the church obviously is somewhere here in the center of... Oh yeah, there it is. So I'm guessing, since it leads to the southeast, they might mean this road. So they advanced from the chateau up until this road, which would bring them up kind of kind of to the level where that other company was pinned down, which at roughly this point would probably have started their bayonet assault into here. To do this, it had to break up into countless small groups. The French had to be pulled out one by one from each trench and from each farm. Finally, due to the total darkness, it had to stop on the path mentioned, and the formation had to be organized. All 3 platoons, except for one reserve group, prepared for defense at night. The 11th Company gradually followed suit, and the 10th Company took its place during the night. During the night of June 3rd, the 11th Company was able to advance. The row of houses about 300 meters from the front was occupied and secured by a group as a combat outpost. The platoon of the 12th Company was in the middle of the company sector with the possibility of action diagonally in front of the entire front. Again. On the right wing was 1/2 platoon of the 12th Company, Kipper, with action along the canal and across the canal. So yeah, it sounds like this, as well as maybe this, was where they ended up in the end. The number of prisoners taken that day was about 300 Frenchmen, including several officers. The captured weapons and equipment could not be inspected because the aim was to advance as quickly as possible. Anyway, I thought this was quite interesting, seeing this early war battle with World War I equipment, no tank support, no air support, kind of botched to a degree. It seems like the Germans were still not quite as competent as they maybe ended up being later. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.